everyone. Good evening or morning, good morning or good afternoon or middle of the night, wherever you are, whatever time of day it is where you're joining from. I'm delighted to welcome you on behalf of the How To Academy. And I'm really thrilled to see so many of you signing in, particularly because having spent the past day or so entirely engrossed in the enormously helpful book, which forms the inspiration for and the basis of our discussion this evening, I know that this will be a very powerful and quite potentially life-changing discussion for many. And that book is, of course, here, bright red and yellow in my screen, The Confident Mind, a battle-tested guide to unshakable performance. It's a hugely practical, actionable guide to achieving that often elusive but very desirable and sought after thing, bulletproof confidence. And I'm delighted to be able to welcome the best possible guide in this. He's, of course, the author of the book and comes to the subject with a great wealth of knowledge and experience as director of West Point's performance psychology program, the nation's gold standard curriculum for teaching and training the mental skills that underlie excellence in any human performance. And he's been the lead performance psychologist at West Point since 1992. And as well as that, a certified mental performance coach with the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And he presents nationwide to university, professional, athletic and corporate groups, and much more. So Dr. Zinsser, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Oh, it's a delight to be here, Hannah. I'm looking forward to this conversation so much.
So I think a good place to start, actually, before we get to the book, is really asking you if you might expand a little on my introduction, because what I was explaining about what you do might not be entirely clear to people who aren't familiar. And I think it helps a great deal as we go through the advice to understand a little more about the kinds of work you do and people you work with.
Certainly. I've been serving here at West Point, the United States Military Academy. That's the American equivalent of the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. I have been teaching some of the intangibles of human performance. Some 30 years ago, the leadership here at West Point basically had what we would call a blinding flash of the obvious. And that obvious flash was, wow, we really need to make sure that our graduates who are going out to lead American soldiers wherever they might have to go, who then might become civilian leaders after they retire from military service, these men and women really need to understand how to be confident even when things are going wrong. I mean, that's a pretty important quality to have, because in any kind of military service, let's face it, you're solving problems all the time. Things are not going well for you pretty much the majority of the time. So one individual decided to investigate to see how we could take some of these intangible ideas, focus, composure under pressure, what the writer Ernest Hemingway referred to as that grace under pressure that seemed to typify so many great performers. Can we build a program? Can we break these things down into practicable steps so that instead of just leaving this hoped for intangible up to chance, we can actually give people an opportunity to learn some skills and practice it and build it the same way we can learn how to build our muscular strength, build our cardiovascular strength, understand various technical and tactical processes. Can we take some of the mystery out of these somewhat intangible, somewhat difficult to measure qualities that are very important in human performance? And I was selected in the year 1992 to be the subject matter expert in this area. I have a doctor of psychology, doctor of philosophy degree from the University of Virginia here in the States in the field of sports psychology. I had been a competitive athlete myself. I had carried heavy packs in mountain ranges all throughout the North American continent. I had experience as a martial arts expert, hand to hand. So I was able to relate to a lot of the challenges that the cadets here at West Point face. And I have been privileged to work and support these young men and women who are undergoing a very difficult 47-month training process. Um, and I'm glad to say that the program really has distinguished itself as one of the finest in the world for helping people get through those mental blocks, get through those difficulties that sometimes prevent all their talent and all their experience and all their hard work from paying off when they have to take a test, take a fitness test, take a final exam, take an interview. And it's the same for other performers and other walks of life around the world.
So
I hope that helps a little.
yes, that is helps a great deal. And so this book here is you talk a lot about performance. You talk about sports a great deal throughout the book, but this is a book for everyone and anyone, isn't it? Whether an athlete or not. And you know, you use the term in the subtitle "unshakable performance," but this is about wider performances throughout careers and life. Confident.
Very, very much so. We are all of us performers in our own way. We are all athletes in our own way. The English word athlete is actually derived from two Greek words, athlon meaning contest, from which we get decathlon, pentathlon, and another Greek word, ethlos, meaning prize. An athlete, by definition, is one who contends for a prize, whether that's winning the Australian Open Tennis Championship or winning the next promotion in your corporate job, or winning the first seat in the Philharmonic Orchestra with the violin. The ancient Greeks, of course, gave Olympic medals to wrestlers and javelin throwers and sprinters. They also gave Olympic wreaths to the winner of the poetry composition, to the oratory competition winner. So let's not think of just competitive sports as a performance arena, but all of us in our jobs, we are contending for a prize. We are called upon to deliver, to express the full extent of our talent and hard work, and confidence is something that allows that to happen. That's why I wrote the book.
So there's so much to ask you and so many fascinating insights and bits of advice. First of all, I'm going to ask you to do what you do near to the beginning of the book, which is define confidence, your own helpful, practical definition of confidence.
Certainly. My functional definition of confidence goes as follows. It is the sense of certainty that you have about an ability or a group of abilities which allows you to perform those abilities pretty much without thinking about how you are doing it, to execute those skills more or less unconsciously. The way you are when you tie your shoes, a very complicated activity involving many muscles and joints and nerve endings, etc., but you do it expertly without having to tell yourself at each step what to do, when to do it, how much to do it, etc., etc. We are all, as human beings, at our best when we allow our training to come out more or less unconsciously, without talking ourselves through it, without worrying about where we are in each step of the process. We can all develop that sense of certainty and bring it out when we need to.
So when you say that without thinking, you know that you talk about that later in the book as if the best way to be confident is to not analyze, to almost get rid of the idea that logic is important, and to just be there's a wonderful expression you use, lose your mind and come to your senses.
Exactly. When we are reflecting on what we are doing, when we are analyzing ourselves at each step, when we are basically self-critical of how well we are executing, when we're giving a presentation or taking a test or playing in that tennis match, we interfere with the smooth execution of our skills. We basically eat up a lot of psychological bandwidth with our own discursive inner talk, and that interferes with us seeing the ball, seeing the situation, and allowing our muscles, our legs, our lungs, our mouth, the rest of our brain to do what it knows how to do.
I feel like this is a good place to bring in something again that comes through the book before we go back to those sorts of internal chatters that we should encourage, which is your very strong, I think, idea that our society, and these are your words, has a problematic and ambivalent relationship with confidence and confident people. And you take issue through the book with a modern day view of confidence. So I wonder if you could explain what is wrong with it and why it's sort of holding us back.
Yeah, I think one of the common misconceptions is that in order to be a confident individual, you have to be somewhat loud and brash and outspoken, and big about yourself. And sometimes that's not particularly appealing for a lot of people. But the truth is that confidence isn't about how loud you are. Confidence is about how you think about yourself on the inside. And you can be a wonderfully polite, modest, wonderful to get along person and still have a tremendous sense of certainty about your abilities in your personal or professional lives. And it really has nothing to do with outspoken arrogance. Unfortunately, we are bombarded with images of outspoken arrogance, um, especially in the sports media, but it's around in other places as well. And I think that basically turns a lot of people off to the idea of being confident. But the good news is that you can be very confident on the inside and be very polite and modest and respectful and likable on the outside.
So there are lots of things that you feel we should readdress about our sort of relationship with confidence and how to find it. And another thing that's a wide misconception in your mind is the idea that confidence is something that's fixed, it's inherited, you were either born with it or without it, and you can't really cultivate it or learn it. So if you aren't a confident person, you should just accept that, and there's not much you can do about it.
Yes, and what a unfortunate misconception that is. Because you think of how many people are held back by that mistaken impression. Have seen confidence as a learnable, practicable skill, that sense of certainty that allows you to be more or less natural and automatic with your execution is indeed something that you can develop if you practice a few principles of effective conscious thinking. You can build that sense of certainty. And I don't care how much confidence you do or don't have at the moment, you can build more. And I hope that is a very encouraging, empowering message to a lot of your viewers and listeners out there.
Let's talk a great deal about how we can do that, as your book tells us. But one misconception, actually, I should rephrase that. One conception that you don't, I think, address that I'm very sort of interested to ask you is whether there's a gender difference in how much confidence people have. Because I think that research has shown that men are more likely to have more confident approach to things than women. So statistically, men are more likely to apply, for example, for jobs with less experience, but with confidence, and women won't apply until they're very, very sure they know everything and are fully accomplished.
Great question. I'll try to give a great answer. I think men pretend to be confident more than they really, really are because everyone expects a young man to be confident. It's part of, quote unquote, being a man. But in my experience, dealing with a lot of talented, motivated young men and a whole lot of talented and motivated young women here at West Point, I would say that they are far more similar in their misunderstandings about confidence and in their need to develop functional confidence. They are far more similar than they are different. Men have a well-developed perfectionistic streak as well. We're supposed to get things right. We're not supposed to show any kind of weakness. Um, all of these things really interfere with that careful, functional, internal state that all of us need. So, yes, I am sure that there are a few idiosyncratic differences amongst some men and amongst some women, but the common denominators, Hannah, are so wide and broad that I don't think it's particularly useful to try to address confidence differently when you're talking to a male audience and a female audience. I could be oversimplifying things, but that's what my experience has led me to conclude.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned there perfectionism then across the board. And it's one of the things that gets so much in the way of confidence because it comes across as, I suppose, fear. Because when you are a perfectionist, you are less likely to jump into something with confidence, and holding you back is the idea you can't do it until it's
Yeah,
perfect. And you say, inevitable human imperfection you talk of, you won't escape it, you might as well make friends with it. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about this idea of the relationship between what's described as destructive perfectionism, which we want to get rid of when we're trying to establish a confident mindset.
certainly. There is a level of perfectionism which really just paralyzes us. We have to get it perfect. We have to get it perfect. And if we're not performing perfectly, as soon as we make that one little mistake, that one little slip, as soon as we experience that one little setback, we are just crushed emotionally because our notion of perfectionism has just evaporated. Um, we are all imperfect human beings. Every member of our team is an imperfect human being. The world is a very imperfect place. So we have to be very good at responding constructively to our own imperfections, to our teammates' imperfections, and we have to be very good at, on the one hand, striving for perfection. Let's go for it. Let's see how great we can be. Let's really try to be perfect, but as soon as we experience an episode of imperfection, let's not beat ourselves up. Let's not demand it from ourselves, but let us enthusiastically strive for it. There's an old saying, and I'm sure many of your listeners have heard it, that the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins. I don't know if that's really the case. And I don't think it's a very helpful notion to hang on to. If your coach or your manager has said, the team that makes the fewest mistakes is going to win, now get out there and play and don't make any mistakes, ladies and gentlemen. What's going to happen to you the minute an inevitable slice of human imperfection shows up? A much more functional way to understand that is the team that wins is the team that plays really well between those episodes of imperfection. So let's strive minute by minute. But if we hit a snag, if we commit an error, if we experience a setback, let's just let that go. Let's not beat ourselves up. Let's not condemn ourselves. Let's get right in to the next piece of the action, to the next moment, and let's strive to be perfect here. And that is an iterative process that we all need to get very good at.
Because you say, and I feel this, I've seen it borne out, as I was saying to you a little earlier before we were joined by the audience, in some very successful people, that actually the highest achievers are, research has shown, ones who have only moderate levels of perfectionism.
That's very true. People who score very, very high on various inventories of perfectionism tend to be stuck in the middle of an organization because they're so worried about committing a mistake. They take fewer risks. They don't respond as well to their inevitable imperfections, while the people at the higher ends of the organization tend to have some perfectionism. Yeah, they really want to get it right. They have high standards, but they keep it in better perspective. So they're not destroyed emotionally when their human imperfection shows up, as it's going to,